Hello, my name is Jana. I live in a forest, and it's January already, and it's the end of the first week of January, I think officially, and I have been finishing some of the things that I didn't finish in December. I had all the intentions to finish all the things that needed finishing, but it didn't happen. And in the beginning of January here in Russia, we have holidays, 10 days off, or even 12 days off. So I was working on stuff. I finished a logo for a friend that I promised to a friend. Finished it. I created a logo for myself for my new business. It's called the Crooked House because reasons, and I kind of started to think about the content creation and all those things. It's a lot. It's like starting a new life because I'm relatively used to making YouTube videos in English right now, but I'm going to start something completely different, and it feels uncomfortable. Anyway, on the topic of finishing things, here's what I haven't finished in January. You might remember it. If you don't remember, here's what happened. I made this bag and I finished it on the outside, but the inside was not finished. I have some binding to do. And I started doing the binding, and so here's the before. It's a little bit flimsy. Some people might like that. And the after looks like that, and it's a lot more structured. It has some weight to it. It's hard to show on camera, but trust me, there is a difference. But I started doing all that off camera because I didn't think that it's going to be that interesting. But I did a half and realized that actually it's a bit tricky. So maybe we can finally finish this pencil case, and I'll show you how I got to this stage, and also things I learned along the way that might be useful to somebody else. So we're going to need a little bit of binding. I didn't make bias tape. I made just a regular, I just cut a straight piece of fabric out of my material. I'm not sure if that's a mistake, but that's what I did, and it kind of works. So maybe bias binding would have been better, but you see I have a little bit of an issue in the corners here, and I haven't figured out exactly what went wrong. But yeah, maybe that's part of it. But we need binding, we need some thread, we need some patience. Let's discuss the normal order of operations when we do binding. So usually what we do is we take our binding and we attach it on one of the sides, usually on a machine, somewhere around this fold, and then when everything is attached all the way around, we fold it, and now we fold it over, and now we need to attach this side. There are different ways to do that. You can just go over this whole thing on a machine again, and if you're good at it, it's going to look neat. Maybe you will see the seam on the other side, but sometimes people manage to do it in a way that they kind of get into this space, so this seam line isn't even visible. I'm not at that stage. What I would do normally is I would attach it on a machine on one of the sides, and then I would flip it, and then I would whip stitch it to this side. And I'm good at this. Like, you can see the stitches, but they are not very visible. So I like this result. And this side, I have done everything by hand, and I've made a couple mistakes. Because you see, if we're going to stitch our binding, when the binding is done, usually it sits like this. It's a seam, it's covered, but it's kind of stands up, and that's fine. On the inside, if you don't need it to do anything else, that's totally fine. You can just leave it like that. But I want to stitch it to the front panel, and I needed to make sure that it has a little bit more body to it. So that means that one of the sides of this binding is going to be invisible. This side is going to be invisible. I don't have to make it pretty. And this whole thing doesn't really have any tension on it. So it doesn't have to be particularly strong either. And that's what I discovered, because when I did this, I did all the good stitches all the way around, but I think that I can actually save myself some time and effort and do it the smart way. And in order to do it the smart way, here's what I'm going to do. This is my ugly side, so to speak, and I don't need this seam to be any good, because if I'm doing it by hand, it's very difficult to get it to be on this stitch line, because I don't see what I'm doing, and it's just very complicated, and it doesn't have to be, because I'm not going to see this when I'm finished. So I'm going to just use a basting stitch and go very close. I'm going to fold it like that, so that I know that my fold is on this seam line, and I'm going to baste it all the way around with a simple basting stitch. And I'm not going to go to the very beginning with it, because I need to be able to close it later. But for now, I'm just going to go around with a simple basting stitch, and I'm not going to later take it out, because it's going to be the stitch that keeps it where it needs to be. Okay, let's do that. The corners are the trickiest part of this whole project, and on this side they are corners, but on this side they're just a plane that's turned in a corner. So I'm trying to keep it kind of in this plane when I'm stitching it. I think that I'm tricking myself into something, but it kind of works, so I'm going with it. That's why I don't like 3D objects too much. A quilt is a lot simpler than that, because it's mostly two-dimensional. So right now I did it mostly without an issue, because here it is. A seam stands up, but it's going to be a problem when we try to attach it here, because it's not going to fit. But we're going to get to this. Now I'm almost back to the beginning, and here I'm going to make sure that this part is nicely folded, and I'm going to see where I need to be. Like, it's almost perfect. I'm going to cut a tiny bit off and put them together and fold them, and it didn't unfold it. Don't be lazy, Yana. Press those things. Doing it on camera makes things more difficult. Please remember, I'm not as bad as it looks. Okay, now I can attach it like that, and that's going to stay in place. There we have it. I have a line of stitching all the way around my pencil case binding, and this stitch line doesn't have to be pretty. It just holds things in place for now. It's not going to be visible. It's not important, so it's just there to make sure that we have a binding in place when we do the pretty part. This is going to be the pretty part, the one that's going to be visible when we're finished. But one crucial step is actually not my favorite. We need to go ahead and clip the wadding as much as we can from this seam, because it doesn't make our life easier. Not my favorite job, and it doesn't get easier because I usually have to use some of those ginormous scissors to do this tiny thing cutting work. I'm not going to film it because it's honestly embarrassing. A couple tips that I figured out just now. First of all, tiny things work better. Second thing, if I didn't stitch this thing if I didn't have those stitches in here, it would have been 1,000 times easier. And right now I'm not even able to get to where I need to get because I ruined it for myself, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to take the stitches out and redo something, because I don't have that kind of time, I don't think. Anyway, how's your year going so far? I don't think that I have as much success as I imagined, but that's normal. I kind of put a lot of expectations upon myself, even though I know that I'm not that energetic of a person. I don't have a lot of spoons. So yeah, we have a little project. We are painting the big attic with my mom. It takes time. I don't spend a lot of time there, but it kind of took a lot of light days. Like, the days are short and we need natural light in there, and I kind of need natural light for everything else that I do. So if I'm spending 3 hours painting walls in the attic, I don't get to use that time to do anything else. But yeah, I think that that's as good as I get. Next on the list is the pretty side, because it's going to be this seam. It's partly visible, If you're doing it right, it's not very noticeable what's going on in there, but just we're going to make it nice, okay? The normal way. The normal, nice way, like we would attach binding to a quilt, like that. We're just starting from here and going all the way around with nice small whip stitches. Hello, it's the next day. I finished stitching the binding to the pencil case. It looks finished, if I'm honest. I keep in mind that this stitch is a basting stitch, but if I would replace it with a nice whip stitch, it would be finished in my books. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to make my life difficult because I want a little bit more rigidity. Let's take a look at how this is when the binding is kind of finished, but it's not stitched to the front panel of the bag. We'll be able to see the difference now. This is the side that I just finished, and this is the side that I finished earlier. Can you see the difference? Probably not. Probably not. But I'll show you one little tiny detail that may make a little bit of a difference. It's just tidier. Let me turn you around. I hope you can see what I'm going to show. Like, when we make garments, it's very important where the seams are pressed to. There are instructions, I don't remember, but we press from the center to the sides or vice versa, I don't remember, but it's important because it gives the thing some structure. Like in this situation, this part is kind of elevated when contrasted to this part. That's because the seam is stitched to this side. It kind of makes this one more important than this one. It's, it's a little bit on top. And in here, we didn't do any stitching of a seam to either side. It's kind of in the middle. That's why these two are equal. I don't like that. I want to have a little bit more rigidity, and I want a little bit of this prioritization of which part is the main part and which part is not the main part. And as we can see, like here, it's very, very subtle, but I think that it's kind of important. Like, this is neater than this. Practically, it doesn't matter at all. I have been using this pencil case even before I finish the inside in any capacity. It was just raw edges and it was still really useful. So the next step in our journey, I'm going to take it inside out and I'm going to whip stitch this flap to the front panel of the bag. And the tricky part is, as usual, the corners. I'm going to show you how I deal with the corners, and then it's going to be finished. Here we go. I'm going to start from the bottom because it makes the most sense, and I'm just going to hide my knot. It doesn't matter. And all of this is not going to be visible. Just making sure that everything is in its place. And I forgot my thimble. Let's do this. Filming doesn't make my life any easier. Now, this corner is approaching, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a little knot just to secure everything in place, and I'm going to do a little running stitch just at the bottom of my seam here. Just enough so that it's not visible from the outside. I feel like up to about here, like the corner is reliably done by this point, and now I'm going to pull. Look, it kind of looks okay, and I'm going to make a tiny knot here to keep it in place. And then I'm going to go back and stitch it into place properly. But now at least I don't have to think about gathering anything because everything is already gathered. It's going to be fine. I know I keep telling that we shouldn't be too worried about stuff, and now I'm showing this in psychopathical level of finishing. Completely unnecessary, but it makes me feel good. If things like that don't make you feel good, don't do them. Practically, it doesn't make a big difference. And I think up to here is going to be okay. Another tiny knot, just to make sure that things don't go anywhere. And now I don't have to stitch my way around too precisely, but I'm going to go behind my binding and hide my thread because I don't want to cut it. So I'm going to go up at around here and just continue my stitching all the way around the pencil case, and I'll see you when I'm done. I wasn't sure if I should make a video about something so small, like adding binding to the inside of the pencil case, Like, usually it's part of so-called assumed knowledge. You know, when somebody makes a sewing pattern, there's a lot of assumed knowledge. Like, the pattern assumes that you know what a binding is, or how to make it, things like that. But it kind of is a little bit trickier than I thought. It's very important, also, in my opinion, to never try to save money on thread. I'm using like Gutermann usually, and like I don't want to have any problems with my machines. I don't want to have any problems with the longevity of things that I make, because I just saved money on thread at some point. I think that that's the silliest thing that a person can do. But some people save money on thread. Imagine spending 200 hours working on a quilt, and then it falls apart because you saved money on thread. That would be a bummer. It's a little bit dark in here. I'm trying to use natural light, so I moved my table closer to the window, but it's winter in Russia, so we kind of have light, but this room in particular is quite dark. So I could do with a lamp, but I'm too lazy to get up and go to get a lamp. I'm done. Everything is stitched in place. Everything is stitched to the front panel. The messy binding stitch that I did is not visible and doesn't make a difference. And it has a little bit of structure now. It doesn't make that big of a difference. I'm really getting caught in the details. A little tip for the corners. When I'm pulling the thread to make a corner, I don't pull too hard, because if it's a little bit loose, I will still catch it with my stitching later, and if it's too tight, it might warp the whole thing. Learned that the hard way. Now, the bag is done. And to be honest, it feels a little bit anticlimactic, because I had it basically finished last year, and I started using it even if it wasn't completely finished. So I think it's going to be a good idea to take a little break. Editing Yana here. We're going to take a little break. I'll see you next week for part 2, where I'm going to make a key fob. I made it. I have a video, not edited, but it's done. But I made this thing. I think I'm going to remake it for the next week's video, because I'm not sure if I like it. And this video is already a little bit long and a lot a bit late. It was going to come out last week, but it didn't happen. So I think I'm just going to cut it short, and we'll make a small video about a key fob next week. Okay? I hope that you're doing great. I wish you the best week possible. I hope that the weather is nice, and yeah,